I signed up at this wrestling school, but it was more a so the name of the school was Kaita Pro, Keep Your Dreams Alive. Kaita Pro. Jimmy Z was the trainer, and it's where I met Sanjay Dutt. Shorty Smalls was probably most of my trainer. A lot of people don't know who that is, but he was a guy that was in the Indies, Virginia, Carolina scene. Um, but that was my first year, but it was in the back of a boxing and martial arts studio. So the ring was not a wrestling ring, it was a boxing ring. But that's where I learned to first run the ropes. And obviously, if you've been in a boxing ring, you know the ropes aren't very tight. Um, yes. And take my first bumps, which is not a wrestling ring, it's a boxing ring. So those bumps were very different. And then about a year after training there, um, I had met Joey Matthews and Christian York, and they suggested that I transfer schools up to Maryland. And so when I transferred schools, I started going to Bone Breakers, which is Danny McDivitt was the head trainer at the time. And I trained there until I got signed. I trained there. Um, and then that really is what opened up a lot of doors for me, because in Virginia, I was only really working Virginia scene for the company I was working with. And I would randomly, there was a girl named Bobby Joe Persephone that there wasn't a lot of females working on the indie scene at the time. So she and I were like partners in crime. So we would travel to Georgia for Bill Barron's for $25 to wrestle each other at the old schoolhouse, or
Awesome.
to, I remember driving all the way to Nashville for Burt Prentice for $25 to wrestle at the fairgrounds. And that was the first time I'd ever been in separate locker rooms, because I didn't even know, but he was still old school and had the heels on one locker room, baby faces on the other. So the only way you could talk is go back around the back of the building to the outside. Like, so you'd have to kind of go and walk a half a mile each way, each of you
Wow.
to meet in the middle to kind of, I don't know if it was really that far. I might be exaggerating. Uphill both ways. But to go chit chat and then go back. So we didn't get to talk a lot, but luckily since we only really wrestled each other all the time, we kind of had our, but yeah.
That's awesome. No, we froze there for a second. I think we're back now.
Yes.
So we just had Chris Silvio on from
Uh-huh.
Virginia, and then they came from there to OVW, and then Timmy Baltimore we had on not too long ago, and I think he
Love.
had mentioned you being in Maryland.
Yes.
Um,
That's where I first met Timmy Baltimore, and he was coming in. And he obviously, uh, wanted to come in and do all the things, and Danny wouldn't let him get near the ring or do any for obvious reasons. But I kind of took little Timmy Baltimore underneath my wing because I knew that he had this brilliance in him, and he was so smart and he loved the business. So I would honestly, I would do those all girls shows, those WEW shows, which were not great, but they were a good time.
right.
And I would have him like manage me in a lot of those matches just to kind of get there and get his, back in the back or whatever. And most of the time I just paid him out of my own pay, which, you know,
Oh, that was nice.
yeah, I just love him so I still love him so much. And I think he's a brilliant man. And he's got a lot to offer, so hopefully. So obviously I was a fan of wrestling through my father. My parents separated when I was very young, when I was like 2. And so my sisters and I, when we'd go visit my dad, wrestling was something that we would watch with my dad, with my grandpa, his father. And it was just like a bonding kind of thing. And I remember saying during the commercial breaks, like, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler one day, like
Yeah.
as all kids do, and then come off the couch with an elbow. I think I'm really doing it. Then the 3 of us, my sisters and I, would beat up my dad. Poor thing. Like every week he got a butt whipping.
Once you started doing that, taking some of the bumps, especially in a boxing ring, I mean, did it hurt? Were you like, what the hell am I getting myself into? You
Oh,
remember that first day going in?
it was extremely painful. I remember, well, I watched first. I remember the first day I went up and I watched, and I came back the next week and paid my money and
So
said, I want to do this. Um, but I was watching, kind of going like, whoa, this is pretty intense. But I've also fallen off of horses my whole life. And I really do think that the, you know, that what my grandma instilled in me with training with horses, because we had to train so hard, and I fell off of countless horses. And I would be like the test dummy as well when we were breaking a horse, of who the first person was going to be on the horse was usually me. After she got it to that level where she thought it would be safer. So I got bucked off a fair amount of times, or just went flying because I was trying to go over a jump and the horse dead stopped in front, or bunny hopped over it, or so it wasn't the falls, except for the first back bump. Like the
Yeah.
flip bumps I was fine with, or like dirt, those ones. But the going back, I remember really struggling with committing to falling straight on my back. And I had to do, I think one of the first bump practices I did, I was holding on to the second rope and you get in that squatted position and you just try to throw yourself back off of that seated. It probably took me an hour straight of trying to do that to where I would commit to just going back. But who really helped me perfect my bump was Dory Funk, I think, when I did the Dory Funk dojo and he's the first one who ever said it to me like that, was like, you have to attack the mat, which Rip, I remember you saying that. But you have to attack, because if you try to find the right way to do it, you just have to go for it. And
Yep.
I think that mentally stuck with me, because I'm like, anything you do, you have to commit in the ring. Like, you have to attack it. You can't tiptoe around it or try to protect yourself. Yes, try to protect yourself.
Yeah, I
But
know what you mean. Yeah.
if you get too careful, that's when you get hurt, you know?
Yeah, big gold and a billfold, so swole that I can't get the shit closed. So I money fold and rubber band wrap, and when it pop, bitches sound like a hand clap.